want to come to a more rigorous refutation of this claim of the positive. No one can purposefully not act. Now consider, however, some economic propositions. What is consumed now cannot be consumed again later. Without private property in production factors, there can be no prices, and without prices, cost accounting is impossible. If we increase the amount of money without increasing the quantity of non-money goods, social wealth will not be higher, but only prices will rise. What is consumed now cannot be consumed again later. Reputation. Economic proposition.
Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to the No Way Jose podcast, on to part 20 of a live reading of Democracy, the God That Failed with my homie, Toad. And with that, without that, enough further ado, actually, I don't think I said that expression right, but whatever. Here's my buddy, Toad.
What's up, man?
What is the expression? Without further ado? Is that right? That's
Yeah.
Without further ado. There you go.
I
Without
think that's
further
right.
ado.
I don't know if that's what you said initially.
I feel like I said something different. It was like in a different order. I didn't think I did some dyslexia there or something. But it's a pleasure to be with you again, Toad. I do like,
Yeah.
It is interesting. We had a good little chat. For the patrons, sorry if anyone does joining for this for live. We are a little bit late, but oh well. We were chit-chatting a little bit. I do like the nature of this series and how it has gone so long, and we've kind of delayed and just been plugging about it. So we've been, it's almost like a time capsule, this series, so it's cool. I like to imagine that someone someday is going to go through this series after the fact and get to eventually experience the wild swings of the American political system through a live reading of Democracy, the God That Failed. So for those who aren't aware, just to mark our time in history, what's going on right now when you're listening to our delving into theory from the great Hoppe. Yes, Trump basically just, I guess it's fair to say, sold out MAGA and said, yep, you ain't getting no Epstein nothing. And why are you guys upset about this and still talking about it? This is crazy. yeah, we got other stuff to worry about, and people are none too happy. Don't know where this is going to lead. Who knows? Maybe 2 episodes from now, we'll be like, oh, yep, and they just burnt down the White House in anger over the child trafficking ring. I don't know what's going to happen. Who knows where this leads? Maybe we'll all get our own Belgium white marches from their Dutroux affair. Who knows? I don't know where this leads. But at the very least, I think the schism has begun. Or not begun, it has been solidified, and I think it's unavoidable. But with that, let's get into our... I guess give you a chance to give some minor commentary. I don't want to linger too much in commentary for this, but I just find it funny. And that is like we have lived through unique times, and this series has gone for a long time. So it's just interesting that, and here we are covering theory and how this all relates to all of this. Meanwhile, craziness is happening. The elites are doing wild shit, and here we are reading theory on elites and the shit that they do.
Yeah, this series started probably years ago, I would imagine, at this point. And we always tie what we're reading into something that's going on then to be current about it, at least for the people that are watching it at that time. But yeah, I don't even remember what current things were going on back then at this point. Yeah, and we'll just continue to do that. And like you said, we'll probably will be reading something and tying it into the Jeffrey Epstein cover-up shit now, because that's the big deal right now. And it's worse than I think you just let on, because they initially were saying they were going to do something about it. Like, we have the list, we have the binders here. They had the pictures of the binders, which we knew those were kind of BS. It was like a fake photo shoot, basically, but it was still like, we're going to do this, whatever. Even Kash Patel was saying, yeah, there is a list, we're going to do this. And then all of a sudden, oh, wait, no. Epstein actually killed himself. There is no list at all. So, see ya. So they're just completely flipping the script on us, and they think we won't notice. So it's, I mean, it's one of the biggest lies that I've ever seen. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's pretty insane to see it happen in real time. But then with that, I mean, also, even with the historical time capsule that's going on with the series, you also get to see the wild changes in my hairstyles and facial hair throughout the series. And the lack of that from Toad, just completely the same every single time.
Yeah, at least I don't look that much older.
Yeah, I don't know how much I've aged. I feel like when I started podcasting, I do look kind of young. But let's go ahead and get into it. We are in the chapter on the errors of classical liberalism and the future of liberty in section 5. Page 229. Let's go ahead and get into it. I will take
4, right? And
it's 4. I'm an idiot and read Roman numerals
I believe
correctly.
It's chapter 11, but I haven't.
What did I say? 5?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm an idiot. I don't know why I got 5. I think I just saw the V and just skimmed it real quick and just went 5. Just threw out the 1 and forgot about the whole rule with the
There's
whatever.
No
I was just being
in 5.
Yeah, I was just being the retard with the Roman numerals. But let's go ahead and get into it. I'll start. So liberalism, actually I'll let you start, since that way I'll take over the next 2 pages, and then you start off on an easy jump.
Okay, yeah, you give me the more retarded reading. I'm the retard here, so you give me the less reading.
Yeah, but then it gives you the commentary, which I think you're better.
Okay, sure. And I'll give some real quick. I will say that leading into this, what we've been talking about in this chapter so far, the errors of classical liberalism. Basically, he's been saying that classical liberals, their approach to it, their ideology essentially leads to a form of socialism again. So he's been talking about that contrast the whole time, saying that they still want to resort to some sort of monopolistic entity over something, at least like personal protection or something like that. So that's basically what he's been talking about. And
yeah, they're not quite ready to give up the government. They're not quite ready to give up the child rape.
Right. they're minarchists, man.
Yeah, a night watchman's tape. They keep just the child rape.
Yeah, listen, man, we got to privatize child rape, all right?
All right, I shouldn't be laughing, but we are in absurd times, and if we don't laugh, we'll cry. This is insane. But go ahead, Toad.
All right. Liberalism's erroneous acceptance of the institution of government as consistent with the basic liberal principles of self-ownership, original appropriation, property, and contract consequently led to its own destruction. First and foremost, it follows from the initial error concerning the moral status of government that the liberal solution to the eternal human problem of security, a constitutionally limited government, is a contradictory, praxeologically impossible ideal. Contrary to the original liberal intent of safeguarding liberty and property, every minimal government has the inherent tendency to become a maximal government.
Yeah, I was just joking, sort of, about my little quips there, but it is funny that it does seem like, so often our reading does tie into current events, and is like, with the things we were just talking about, in this section being on literally just talking. We're starting off with liberals' erroneous acceptance of the institution of government. It
Right.
consists being consistent with their beliefs and yada yada yada. Here we are. So it really does kind of come down to the minarchism thing. It's the fact that they don't find a conflict in belief between their ideas in liberalism and the what are accepted beliefs in liberalism, but for some reason they carve out this essentially this illogical exception for the thing that is the state.
Right. So his idea of what he's talking about with classical liberalism, he's basically talking about, I mean, I mentioned like Bastiat in the last episode, but he's also really kind of referring to like the founding fathers, like their idea of it was we're going to have this very limited government. But of course, that there is going to be a government. It's just going to stay limited. But of course, throughout this book, he talks
just
about
limited child rape,
right?
And then,
right.
and then what happens is you go through an economic boom, just like without having a welfare state, and then you get to like max child rape, and now so kind of that 100 years of like without the government constraint, but you still have that government, and oh no, now we just have child rape everywhere.
Right.
Sorry, I can't help but keep making the parallel. It's too easy. It is like that's basically that's what government is.
Right. Well, he's essentially saying, like the founding fathers, they set up this minimal government here.
Yeah.
Oh, we have the Constitution.
Yeah.
That's going to limit government.
But we're not ready to get rid of the child rape yet. But we
Right.
keep at least that.
Yeah. I mean, they had it was a good idea. Let's try this out. The Bill of
Yeah, if you're gonna have
Rights,
child rape, I would prefer you keep it to a minimum. I would, yeah. I don't want you to do it all, but if you're going to, keep it to a minimum.
Yeah, I mean the Bill of Rights, I think at the very least has slowed the growth of government. I think to what would have happened without it. You know what I mean? Because people are still like the people that are really into the Constitution are still like, well, you can't do this. Like you can't restrict our right to bear arms and whatever. You know what I mean? So I think
they have, and they will continue to do so.
Right. But because of it, there is still that like vein, like in the American spirit that's like, no, fuck you. Like at some point, we're not gonna accept this. You know what I mean? Which I think has been helpful a little bit. But what, of course, he's saying throughout this entire book is that if you have a government and the government is going to interpret its own powers, which is what we have here, the government interprets the Constitution, even though it's supposed to be a checks and balances thing. Obviously, that has not worked out, and the government is not going to limit itself because it has no incentive to do that. So that's, I mean, throughout this book, he talks about that, and it's even more. That's really the entire thing with Anatomy of the State. I mean, that's really the the premise of that book, Rothbard there. But yeah.
All right. Well, we're 2 paragraphs in. I think I've said child rape like 20 times, so I think I'm gonna stop making parallels between government and the child rape, so we don't get this episode removed from YouTube.
Well, we thought Trump. Well, we're saying it's bad though.
Yeah, we're saying it's bad. Like,
we thought Trump was gonna, potentially limit government to various extents, and that has not been what has happened.
We thought he was a child rape minimalist, and in fact, it seems like he's might be more, maybe dare I say, maybe even a maximalist. I don't know. Maybe there's a third position here, but
he's at least one that covers it up.
Yes,
at the very least.
At the very least. All right, let's go ahead and get into this next page. Once the principle of government, judicial monopoly, and the power to tax is incorrectly accepted as just, any notion of restraining government power in safeguarding of individual liberty and property is illusory. Predictably, under monopolistic auspices, the price of justice and protection will continually rise and the quality of justice and protection fall. A tax-funded protection agency is a contradiction in terms, for it is an expropriating property protector that will inevitably lead to more taxes and less protection, even if, as liberals have proposed, a government limited its activities exclusively to the protection of pre-existing private property rights. The further question of how much security to produce would arise. The further question of how much security... did I accidentally read that twice? Motivated as everyone is by self-interest in the disutility of labor, but equipped with unique power to tax, a government agent's goal will invariably be to maximize expenditures on protection, and almost all of a nation's wealth can conceivably be consumed by the cost of protection, and at the same time to minimize the production of protection. The more money one can spend and the less one must work to produce, the better off one will be. Now, I want someone, when they watch this episode, to go out and make a meme for this episode. I want you to make a meme of that one guy where he's going, he's really like trying hard not to do something, and everyone's like, oh, when you're trying not to say whatever, and when it's just saying when Jose is trying not to say, when Jose's trying not to say child rape in part 20 of Allied Breathing, a Democracy, the God That Failed. The meme will probably only get like 3 likes, but I'll really dig it. but it's a little bit too niche to really do well online. But it would apply here because as I'm reading this once again, it really does seem like there is a weird ANCAP God out there, and he has selected this reading for this very particular slice in time for us because every little bit I completely just swap it to CR. We'll call it CR. It's like I can literally apply it to that. Cheese ravioli. Now we're the elites bartering for them in their emails.
In John Podesta's emails.
All right. What do you got anything to add to this? I can't get my head out of the gutter because it really is just too surreal that we're reading this, and it's like, yeah, you're right. You are right, Hoppe. And I can swap out every bit of this for swap the words. And you're like, yeah, that's right. Like literally, I mean, hey, they maximize expenditures on protection. Look at everything they do when it comes to protection. They minimize their production of protection. I would think this example that I keep pointing to over and over again would be a really good example that maybe not so much when they maximize expenditures, although even then, think about the money that has been wasted in the pursuit of this illusory pursuit of justice that we didn't get. And then, in fact, we actually minimized the production of protection to where there were no protection for those children, and then even for us, in the fact that these elites are being now coerced into making decisions that affect the rest of us. So and that's quite a good example of maximizing expenditures and minimizing production.
Right. When what he's saying is the incentives for government line up that way. So they're incentivized to want to collect more and more taxes. That means, they're incentivized to provide less protection for that. Yeah. Oh, well, we need more. We always need more. That's why we need more taxes, right? And they actually they do it with like a fear tactic as well, which of course we were talking about during like the COVID stuff and whatever.
Yeah, do you want cheese ravioli? Because if you don't give us money, there'll be cheese ravioli everywhere, you know?
Right. Yeah, so they make you think that because they are the protector, they need constant money, more and more money because you're not protected right now. You need more of it, whatever. These terrorists, foreign terrorists are coming to get you, so we need more money for that. And then what else was I going to say? Oh, they also want to maximize the expenditure, so everything's going to be more costly to the taxpayer as well because, we need more and more of it, and that's just, we're going to be able to collect more taxes that way. That's how the incentives line up. And then he did just make that point again where if you have a government entity that is protecting property, that's just hypocritical on its face because the fact that it is paid for by taxes, which are a property violation, it is a property violator just by its existence. So he made that point again as well. But
All right. Moreover, a judicial monopoly will inevitably lead to a steady deterioration in the quality of protection. Oh, wow. Another perfect example. If no one can appeal for justice except to government, justice will be perverted in favor of the government, constitutions, and Supreme Courts notwithstanding. Constitutions and Supreme Courts are government constitutions and agencies. Did I jump a line? No, I'm right. I read that. And whatever limitations on government action they might contain or find is invariably decided by agents of the very institution under consideration. Predictably, the definition of property and protection will continually be altered and the range of jurisdiction expanded to the government's advantage. So, to bring it back to cheese ravioli, it would be almost as if some people working for the government did some cheese ravioli, and then after that, then they go to the government people go to the government and go, hey, these guys did cheese ravioli, and then the government goes to they bring the government to the government to get the government to hold the government to account for what the government did with that whole cheese ravioli thing. And that's basically the point, And I think we're once again seeing the effects of such a thing.
Right, you're asking the government to hold themselves accountable, which they're not going to do. And then he brought up the Supreme Court example again, where they interpret the Constitution, but of course, it is the government interpreting its own document that is supposed to restrict it. So, what do you think is going to happen? They're going to do what is best for themselves. I mean, that's just the way humans operate. So they're going to protect themselves. They're going to continue to justify their existence as well by, what we said before, constantly saying, well, you need more protection from us. Well, you need more protection that's provided by us, I should say, because that didn't sound quite right. This episode's all over the place, but that's probably all right. I don't even know what other thoughts I had in there, but I guess that was basically about it.
Yeah. All right. Second, it follows likewise from the error regarding the moral status of government that the traditional liberal preference for an attachment to local, decentralized, and territorially small government is inconsistent and contradictory. Contrary to the original liberal intent, every government, including local government, has an inherent tendency towards centralizing and ultimately becoming a world government. So I guess he's making the point that even your local government is corrupt and has these same incentives in place. Obviously, we know Hoppe is kind of a hyper localism, so he is still saying his only point is there. I think here, which he'll probably get to, is still that maybe later, and we may have already gone to this at some point in the book that that just may be something you can work with better if you're trying to you're trying to operate in that system as opposed to on the federal level. That doesn't mean that's an acceptance as an institution in any way, shape, or form. He's still saying, hey, they still have the same incentives. It's just maybe easier to fight and get maybe work certain things in a smaller level. I think is probably the best way to put that. I would say.
Right. So I mean, basically the main point of this book almost is essentially that smaller governments, like smaller territories that are under the control of a particular government, have they're kind of easier. It's easier to see the bad that they're doing, and they're kind of easier to restrict in a way. And then he's saying that because he's a decentralist. But then he's saying that these errors of classical liberalism lead to more and more socialism and actually lead to a growth of government and actually lead to larger central governments, which is the opposite of what you actually want.
Oh yeah, he's also making the point. I didn't even get to it with the traditional liberal. I think he may not have said it, but I think he's implying because of the idea of that. Actually, no, that's not wrong. The traditional liberal conception did have. Sorry, I'm wrong. I was thinking that because the traditional liberals, or who call themselves traditional liberals of today, don't like secession. But I think the classical liberals that he's talking about do, because he's usually referring to Mises, and that's one of the major characteristic differences between the classical liberals of today and of old, which Mises has pointed out at the very beginning of this book that was Mises believed in secession. He was a classical liberal. I think he considered himself a classical liberal, I believe.
Mises?
And so, or am I wrong? Or do you consider himself a liberal?
I'm not even entirely sure.
Yeah, I think he considered himself some sort of liberal at that point, so I think that might be what he's pointing at. To some extent, he might be pointing at the flaws of him as well. So, or at least how classical liberalism is being interpreted in the current sphere, perhaps.
Right.
So.
One other thing that's interesting, just because he is kind of making references to the founding of the United States, and if you know a little bit about U.S. history, you know that the way that the government wound up being formed wasn't even the initial idea. There was a battle between basically Federalists and Anti-Federalists, with Federalists being not like the Federalist Party, but the Federalists, lowercase f, basically were the ones that wanted more decentralization. So initially we actually had the Articles of Confederation instead of the Constitution, and that was actually a less centralized setup where the states actually had more individual power versus a larger federal government. So that would have been better as well. But of course, that got cooed.
Yep, Constitution was a coup. Yeah, we all sucked the dick of the Constitution, and really, in fact, it was actually a bastardization of the previous document, and it. Whereas the previous document actually was much more amenable. I mean, we still would have probably had similar issues. I mean, who knows?
Yeah.
I mean, still, but it, comparatively, it was preferable. So.
Yeah, and it might have taken a much longer time to see a growth like this. If we just had a more decentralized system to begin with, it might have not become this.
Or it might even be worse, because then obviously, as we implied earlier, it's the concept of we had that 1 century of in America where we had almost no, essentially welfare or anything, and so we were able to be insanely productive. So essentially, they allowed from a parasitical perspective, the parasite reduced its feeding and allowed its host to flourish, but it also allowed it to grow by grow as well. So it's kind of it's like the smarter way. So we were able to kind of grow crazy booms, but with that we also had this way huger government, and now we're kind of seeing them kind of flip it, and we're losing the productivity, but now we have the empire. So
we should have just had no federal government at all.
Yeah. So unironically, yes. But all right, once it is incorrectly accepted that in order to protect and enforce peaceful cooperation between two individuals A and B, it is justified and necessary to have a judicial monopolist X, a twofold conclusion follows. If more than one territorial monopolist exists, X, Y, and Z, then, just as there can presumably be no peace among A, B, and without X, so there can be no peace between the monopolists X, Y, and Z, as long as they remain in a state of anarchy with each other. Hence, in order to fulfill the liberal desideratum of universal and eternal peace, all political centralization and unification, and ultimately the establishment of a single world government is justified and necessary.
Right. Yeah. So again, he's just talking about the tendency of the liberal worldview to lead to a centralized government. And he's basically saying that that would happen also because of disputes that occur between smaller governments. They would kind of use that to justify, oh, well, we need a larger government to settle the disputes between the smaller governments, right? Which is almost, I guess, kind of like the Civil War type of thing, right? Where we did have, secession springing up, and then it was like, no, we actually need a union, and we need this, one central government to still, like, resolve this dispute, essentially, and take control over everything, Oh, no, we're neo-Confederates here.
All right, on to you, buddy.
All right. We're on the next page, right? I think we are.
Yep, 232.
Right. Last, it follows from the error of accepting government as just that the ancient idea of the universality of human rights and the unity of law is confused and under the heading equality before the law transformed into a vehicle of egalitarianism. As opposed to the anti-egalitarian or even aristocratic sentiment of old liberals, once the idea of universal human rights is combined with government, the result will be egalitarianism and the destruction of human rights. I like that. That paragraph actually sums up a lot of what one of the main issues is in like the libertarian sphere with like the left libertarians, and they tend to have an egalitarian worldview, even if it's just where they're making the point, well, oh, everybody should be equal under the law. That's what we mean by egalitarianism. But just having that worldview at all tends to lead to, just because it's an egalitarian mindset, it just tends to lead to wanting egalitarianism and wanting, which requires force because people are not equal.
That is true. That is a good point.
Different. Yeah.
I don't think I've ever really thought about that one too much. That's a good point, because it's like you do kind of go, well, what the hell? And then when I think about it, you're like, oh, but like I get what he's getting at. It's the idea that like, I don't know, you would be, if we did theoretically live in magical ANCAP land, this would be that this is a foreign concept, because it would be theoretically there would be private courts or whatever, and also jurisdictions have different rules. This idea we're equal under the law, no, you are not. You fall under jurisdiction of wherever the fuck you go. I mean, you're equal, I guess, in the sense that like it's just as improper for people to aggress against you or something. But so far as whatever given area or jurisdiction or I know whatever given rules you are, so it does kind of corrupt it. I mean, it does make sense if you are going to have a law, a law in that sense, like a monopolistic type thing, that you would want an equality under the law. But that's kind of the whole point, because it's like I'm proposing a whole different framework where this wouldn't even be a conceptual thing in here. So this is almost like this rotting in it, that from there everyone draws this conclusion that even myself right now, just kind of think about it, was kind of like immediately it's kind of like, and then had to think about it. It's kind of like, you're like, oh, you're like, the fact that I even think that way, that I think that I should be entitled. And there's even a good point, even in the, we kind of probably the Federalists and the Federalists, but like in the idea of like different states have different rules, even that is something that kind of outrages. Like we'll have conservatives that, understand, oh, state rights, this, that. And even then some liberals, depending on what the thing is, if it's weed, they'll be whatever. But, even they, especially, I think, feel like typically amongst the leftists, they do have this knee-jerk egalitarian reaction where they see, oh, some say, oh, look, this, that law. And you're like, to some extent, you're like, okay, well, don't fucking live there. Like, I mean, I like...
Yeah, Florida's not going to enforce COVID shit. Well, then I think Florida's better, so I want to live there. So as Hoppe points out in this book all the time, basically, which we talked about this, I think, during the COVID stuff probably, that he's talking about if you have a bunch of, like, smaller governments, that actually kind of enables you to move to one that has... like laws that you actually prefer, basically, which probably would be like fewer laws. It would be a less restrictive government.
So it's like a framing problem if you think about it. It literally is just from the jump, the fact you're framing this from a monopolistic perspective, i.e. the government, it creates this framing that inherently you kind of have to have an egalitarian framework baked in from the jump, because even, like we just admitted here, if we're going to accept this proposition of this thing existing, you kind of do, to some extent, have to incorporate an egalitarian thing, because it's like, I mean, depending, I guess, what we're specifically talking about. But, so there is some component. At the very least, even we're admitting there's incentives to at least, make uniform world government, like he's saying, like uniform law of some sort.
Yeah, I mean, he's saying just, based on the existence of a government at all, it implies that, well, the government is going to be making laws under which everybody should be equal, and then that leads to egalitarianism, although I hadn't even thought about it. Like, when I was first saying that, I was thinking, well, just it's the leftist mindset that they say that one thing and think that leads to another, which I think is probably also not true, because there is a difference between sort of like a law being applied equally and egalitarianism. Like, those are not really the same thing either,
Yeah.
but they tend to conflate the two.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Although I'm not even sure the law should necessarily even be applied equally. To be
Well, that's what I was
honest.
kind of getting at. The idea that, like, because it kind of the point is getting this is a framing thing, because the alternative and magical,
Yeah, I think it should be
whatever.
applied more harshly against my enemies, to be honest.
All right, let's go ahead and get to the next section. But
Yes, I mean that was a small paragraph that had a lot.
it did.
a
I
lot
think
in it,
that was meaningful. Yeah.
All right. Once a government has been incorrectly assumed as just and hereditary princes and kings ruled out as incompatible with the idea of universal human rights, the question of how to square government with the idea of the universality and equality of human rights arises. So that's basically what we're just saying, that because the government exists, then you have to start talking about the equality of how the laws are applied.
Yep.
All right. The liberal answer is to open participation and entry into government on unequal terms to everyone via democracy. Everyone, not just the hereditary class of nobles, is permitted to become a government official and exercise every government function. However, this democratic equality before the law is something entirely different from and incompatible with the idea of one universal law equally applicable to everyone, everywhere, and at all times. In fact, the former objectionable schism and inequality of the higher law of kings versus the subordinate law of ordinary subjects is fully preserved under democracy in the separation of public versus private law and the supremacy of the former over the latter. These are some
Some
deep
bars.
paragraphs here, man.
They really are. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is like, when I first read this book, this was one of the paragraphs, at least one of the ideas, because I don't know if he mentions it multiple times in the book, that really kind of stood out to me, which he's basically saying, oh, well, if you have a government and everybody has to be equal under the law, well, then that also means that
They should have equal say, right? And especially
Right,
because he's gonna you ruled
Right.
out the idea of monarchs,
Right.
So you ruled out the idea of some one entity person, individual person, being able to take the rule. Because obviously the argument in this book is that that's preferable. He's not making the ultimate argument. He's ultimately arguing for anarchy.
Right.
But then obviously the point being is that then once you've baked in that, you buy into this idea of human rights and blah, 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 but then you have this false, baked into it, but we have to have a government. From there, then you go into, well, if we're not going to have kings or whatever, now everyone, this does have to be sort of equally, right? We have this idea of equally. And even then the point is, the preference of the king is it's the idea of like, oh, I'm equal to the law. Like, imagine saying that to the king. You're like, no, I'm doling out the punishment here, and
Right.
I don't fucking like your face, so you're exiled. Like, I don't know. Like,
Well, yeah,
I mean, obviously it's a little bit ridiculous, but like the point being is to some extent there obviously is a little bit of a whim of somebody. So it is what it is. And but then, the idea is like, oh, well, we got to rule that out because we don't like that. Which it's fair to not like that, but then but the exception here is accepting is of the government. So they throw out the monarchy, thinking that kind of solves the problem. Oh, well, it's the monarchy or whatever. And you're like, now you have incentive to create. Now you're essentially making an argument for why everyone needs to vote and everyone needs to be involved.
Correct.
And now here we are.
Yeah,
So,
it's an
sorry,
argument.
I cut you off a little bit.
It's an argument that everybody should have to be able to vote, and therefore also an argument that everybody should be able to get into the government in some way or another. Which, by the way, we don't even have a democracy here, even though democracies suck. But what we have here also sucks, and we know that not everybody has an equal ability to get into government here. I mean, you have to be one of the chosen few here.
And then he even makes it the point, and the point I want to make sure you drive in. I mean, we're not even actually technically done with this paragraph, but the point they make there at the end is that even still, though, despite all that, the complaints that one would make about monarchy still apply in the idea of you still have this the break between the elites and the peasants. Essentially, is kind of what he's driving at.
Right.
Your difference in essentially class, which bring it back to cheese lasagna or whatever, or cheese ravioli. It's kind of literally that's the point. Many people have said. I've seen commentators that aren't even as deep in this stuff. It is this is a two-tier justice system, and that is. I mean, once again, and obviously we're not technically a democracy, but something. Obviously, we have a lot of the similar incentives in place. And hey, we don't have a monarchy, but we still have this rule of the kings, essentially, higher law of kings. We have untouchables. We have people that are different tier to us. And like you said, the idea of democracy is like, oh, everyone's part of the government. It's like everyone has access to it, but even then, there's still an elite class. Like, not everyone chooses to be part of the government.
Right.
That's choosing to be a parasite. Like, that's
Right.
what that is.
Right. The problem really is, though, that with democracy, you essentially get the elites that you wind up choosing are not the people that should fulfill those roles. Like, you're choosing false elites, essentially, which we get into, like, elite theory and some of those, Italian philosophers that talk about it, Mosca and stuff, and that's some interesting stuff, and I think they are correct. And I think Hoppe kind of alludes to it in this book, where he's basically saying that, well, at least in, like, the monarchy system with the king, there's sort of some reason why that guy became the king. Like, there, like, maybe he's, like, less of a false elite than what you would get out of people voting. You know what I mean? Like, he's there for a reason. Like, he has, I mean, yeah, it's going to be based on, he's just in this family or whatever, but also that family sort of rose to power because they, for some reason, like, they were able to wield power over other people, and maybe that is a reason why they are sort of elite. Like, they are just stronger in that way, which that sounds anti-libertarian, although I don't really think that it is.
Well, it's a matter of preferences. It's kind of as I've been trying to drive, and I was thinking as we talk about, as a lot of my people know, with a lot of my coverage, I talk about a lot of these spooky child trafficking rings and tie this into the elites and stuff. And there is some component a lot of times when you get to the royals, in some of the how this does have very creepy ties, and it does seem there were a lot of creepy royals doing some very, I don't know, questionable things possibly from my research. So they definitely seem like, I don't know, evil lizard people. So I'm no means saying these are great people, and they may even a lot of times be, on individual level, may actually be maybe more evil than your average Democratic politician or something. I don't mean like by the party, but the point is that, the idea of monarchy is you have like a smaller ruling party, generally speaking. Theoretically, the idea being a king, so technically one person, as opposed to a whole horde of mass of fucking army of politicians, essentially, just like an infinite, So like now, if we're looking at this from perspective of evil versus evil, like, okay, we're talking about one guy that maybe has crazy, awful, deep, dark Jeffrey Epstein level, or higher desires. Like he orders the plus package from Jeffrey, whereas we have, a horde of politicians from America that may just be buying the budget. Maybe half of them buy the budget one, maybe about 20% just buy the normal package. Maybe about 5% of those politicians get the plus. So like overall, you're getting more evil with the democracy option. But it's just that with the monarchy, you have maybe a better example of a singular person of like, holy shit, look how fucked up this guy is, as opposed to the horde of evil.
Well, that's a point that he makes throughout the book, is that with a monarchy, the distinction between the classes, between the ruling class and the ruled, is just way more obvious. So the ruling class can kind of get away with
even then, to my example with that, even though those creepy people, it's like they kind of had to keep that shit on lock, because it's like, hey, once they start finding out that you're doing hunting parties on your fucking grounds with peasants, it's like, this may not work out for you. You got to kind of keep a tamp on that a little bit.
Whereas in this case, since the idea is that anybody can sort of join that ruling class, then you don't like it. It makes that distinction between the two. It like totally blurs it, right? So you don't really know anymore. Well, it's a democracy, right? It's the rule of the people now. Yeah.
Oh, we voted for them to do cheese
blurred,
ravioli. Yeah. We voted for them to do cheese ravioli. I voted for this.
Right. And even in a pure democracy, you wind up with rule of the mob basically instead of the rule of one, which is, I think, worse as well. Which is what he points out throughout this book as well. So.
Yeah. All right, keep going, bud. You still got this next page, and we're not even done with this paragraph. That was a good one.
Oh yeah, there's a lot in here, man. I didn't realize how deep this was in very few words as well. Under democracy, everyone is equal insofar as entry into government is open to all on equal terms. In a democracy, no personal privileges or privileged persons exist. However, functional privileges and privileged functions exist. Mm-hmm. As long as they act in official capacity, public officials are governed and protected by public law and occupy thereby a privileged position vis-a-vis persons acting under the mere authority of private law, most fundamentally in being permitted to support their own activities by taxes imposed on private law subjects. Privilege and legal discrimination will not disappear. To the contrary, rather than being restricted to princes and nobles, privilege, protectionism, and legal discrimination will be available to all and can be exercised by everyone. So we did sort of just say some of those things in what we just talked about where, yeah, I mean, again, it kind of blurs the line. Anybody can enter into government now if you have this type of system. So then you don't really know anymore. You don't really see that distinction between the ruling and the ruled. But also, he's sort of saying, well, it kind of gives this illusion that, well, the law is applying equally to everybody here because we're in this democracy. But obviously, that's not the case, as we keep pointing out tonight. The same law is not being applied equally, obviously, between the ruling class and the ruled class.
Yeah, he's making the point that you have privileged functions, is what he's saying, or functional privileges, essentially the idea that, like, oh, everyone doesn't have personal ones technically in a democracy, but if you were to decide to make that choice to go cross the divide into parasite territory, that now you do get certain privileges and functions. So the difference is, as opposed to just being, so the idea is like, oh, this is egalitarian.
Yeah,
you all
in
have
power
options
now. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, how can you be upset that this guy got voted in for cheese ravioli? You could have got voted in for cheese ravioli. Like,
right.
You could have been there. Like, how are you upset about this?
Right. And you're relying on, the people to make that decision. The government's going to lie to the people to maintain their illusion and their rule, basically. Whereas at least with the monarchy or whatever, and in cases like that, at least you sort of kind of had like a strong man to some extent being the one who winds up taking control, which at least that person is more of like a natural elite, essentially, than the people who get voted in under this system, which is what I was trying to say before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, like a good, rather than being restricted to princes and nobles, privilege, protectionism, and legal discrimination will be available to all. I think that kind of goes back to the privileged functions, and I find that interesting because it's like, as opposed to the princes and nobles, like for example the Dutroux affair. Most people think that they're part of the reason. I think it was Prince Albert, I believe, in Belgium. Or maybe King Albert, I forget. But they thought that he was involved, and so that's why they thought, like, a lot of people theorized that's why a lot of that stuff got shuttled off, because they still had kind of this weird semi-monarchy to where, like, he literally legally couldn't be charged for anything. It literally was a separate system of justice because he was the king, which I think technically might even apply to things like Britain and stuff. I've watched videos before about, like, actual, like, technically the queen and stuff still has certain power. They just don't use it. The same thing. Yeah, and the same thing here. Like I was getting with the Dutroux affair. Like I think technically speaking, through their legal system, the king couldn't be charged with a crime.
Well, yeah, and we know
he's
that
the king. So
in the case of Britain, we had Prince Andrew. There was definitely some stuff that came out about him being involved in the Epstein stuff, and then I believe he died not that long after that, if I'm not mistaken, right?
No, he didn't die. Not Prince Andrew.
I'm thinking of Philip, I guess. Andrew's father. I don't know the British monarchy.
I mean, there was nothing Epstein related with death so far as royals, but I mean, there definitely were a lot of other people. Wasn't it John Luke Brunel, I think, died in prison? So there was a whole lot of people who died around it that people don't realize about it.
Yeah,
but
that was another mysterious death there. Yeah.
Yeah. But anyways, point I was driving at there is that was more of a semi-modern example of where there is privilege to the prince, king, prince, noble, whatever. But it's like now you compare and contrast that between now we have this Epstein thing. And the same thing is happening, but there's not a king involved. And if anything, it's like kind of the same thing. If anything, it's almost like slightly more comforting when it's like, yeah, well, it's the king. He does what he wants. Whereas at least like with democracy, there's like this comfort, or there's this like opposite, like, I don't know, like there's this like this expectation centered around it. Whereas at least like you said, it's kind of like what it is. Like monarchy, it's like there's like you can be like, well, fuck that guy, but like you know what the roles are.
Right.
Yeah. All right, let's get into the next paragraph, bud.
Yeah. Predictably, under democratic conditions, the tendency of every monopoly to increase prices and decrease quality will only be stronger and more pronounced. As hereditary monopolists, a king or prince regarded the territory and people under his jurisdiction as his personal property and engaged in the monopolistic exploitation of his property. Under democracy, monopoly and monopolistic exploitation do not disappear. Even if everyone is permitted to enter government, this does eliminate the distinction between the rulers and the ruled. Government and the governed are not one and the same person. Instead of a prince who regards the country as his private property, a temporary and interchangeable caretaker is put in monopolistic charge of the country. The caretaker does not own the country, but as long as he is in office, he is permitted to use it to his and his protege's advantage. He owns its current use of fruct, but not its capital stock. This will not eliminate exploitation. To the contrary, it will make exploitation less calculating and more likely to be carried out with little or no regard to the capital stock. In other words, exploitation will be short-sighted. Moreover, with free entry into and public participation in government, the perversion of justice will proceed even faster. Instead of protecting pre-existing private property rights, democratic government will become a machine for the continual redistribution of pre-existing property rights in the name of illusory social security until the idea of universal and immutable human rights disappears and is replaced by that of law as positive government-made legislation. It's another hefty paragraph there, really, yeah. So, I mean, we already made the point that this blurs the lines between the ruling and the ruled, but he is also kind of bringing up time preference again, which he has done already throughout this book, and he's basically saying that time preference becomes way higher when you have this democratic system because the people who are in the government, they don't even, it's not their government anymore. They're just temporarily in the government. So they don't even really give a shit what happens to it afterwards. They're just in there for this period of time. They just want to use it to their advantage while they're in there.
Well, even to my evil example before,
as
it's
much
like,
as they can.
Yeah, and even to my, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but even to my evil example before, it's like the idea of like, okay, you may have like one person with a super, concentrated evil or a horde of evil actors now interacting all over the place. You got to think that in a certain sense, like, yeah, you may say, okay, sure, each individual person may be, generally speaking, at a lower evil level than just the one person, but now you have a horde of them and they're all out there acting independently, doing this and that and, whatever, as opposed to just one guy who's limited to the actions of one human being. So it is like, you just say kind of you exponentially increasing the problem, essentially.
Right, but he's also saying that under the monarchy system, the ruler tends to have lower time preference as well because they know they're going to be like passing this down to the heirs or whatever. So they're basically kind of permanently in charge of this thing in a way. So they'll have a tendency to maintain it better, which he's made that point, in other places in this book as well. But yeah, this book is meant to be read just on a chapter by chapter. Like, you're supposed to be able to read one chapter like as its own unit and figure out what the hell he's talking about. So he reiterates points throughout the book. But yeah.
Yeah, I think that he may have done these. Were these like a collection of essays or something? I might be wrong, or something. It may have been written that way. They definitely seem like they were almost written in that sense, like they were written in an essay format, like you said, to be able to stand alone, individually on their own, but also like written in a way they can kind of like Sheldon Richman's like Coming to Palestine type deal. Maybe not so much to that degree. Obviously, that one's very much more clearly, smaller essays or whatever thrown together. But this has a similar feeling. But let's go ahead and get into the next part. In light of this, an answer to the question of the future of liberalism can be sought. By the way, we're in part 5. Because of its I got that one right. Because of its own fundamental error regarding the moral status of government, liberalism actually contributed to the destruction of everything it had originally set out to preserve and protect: liberty and property. Once the principle of government had been incorrectly accepted, it was only a matter of time until the ultimate triumph of socialism over liberalism. The present neoconservative end of history of global U.S. enforced social democracy is the result of 2 centuries of liberal confusion. Thus, liberalism in its present form has no future. Rather, its future is social democracy. And the future has already arrived, and we know that it does not work. Just move on to the next paragraph. Once the premise of government is accepted, liberals are left without government when socialists pursue this premise to its logical end. If monopoly is just, then centralization is just. If taxation is just, then more taxation is also just. And if democratic equality is just, then the expropriation of private property owners is just too, while private property is not. Indeed, what can a liberal say in favor of less taxation and redistribution? If it is admitted that taxation and monopoly are just, then the liberal has no principal moral case to make. To lower taxes is not a moral imperative. Rather, the liberal case is exclusively an economic one. For instance, lower taxes will produce certain long-run economic benefits. However, at least in the short run, for some people, the current tax recipients, lower taxes also imply economic costs. Without moral argument at this disposal, a liberal is left only with a tool of cost-benefit analysis, but any such analysis must involve an interpersonal comparison of utility, and such a comparison is impossible, scientifically impermissible. Hence, the outcome of cost-benefit analysis is arbitrary, and every proposal justified with reference to them is mere opinion. In this situation, democratic socialists only appear more upfront, consistent, and consequent, while liberals come across as starry-eyed, confused, and unprincipled or even opportunistic. They accept the basic premise of the current order of democratic government, but then constantly lament its anti-liberal outcome.
Yeah, I mean, he's kind of just summing up a lot of stuff he already said. The hypocrisy of, the case of classical liberalism basically leading to more government because it requires the government to exist in the first place. He does add in there that when the liberals, I guess, try to discuss this or debate this, they have to resort to basically a utilitarian argument. So he gets into the big dispute that happened between Rothbard and David Friedman, where Rothbard was on the deontological side of that, basically saying that, well, your ideas need to have a moral grounding to them. Like, you basically need to be looking at, does this violate property rights or does it not, versus basically just the utilitarianism of, what is I don't want to say necessarily what is the outcome of this, because I am kind of Machiavellian, but I agree with Rothbard in his disagreement with David Friedman there. So I don't know if I'm describing that in the best way.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like this, that argument, I understand in a certain sense that deontological versus consequential, but it's almost like a misnomer, because it's almost like I think when you guys get deep into it, it's almost like, I don't know, they're kind of almost the same thing. I think this is actually a lot of Hoppe's, argumentation ethics type stuff. God, what was I? Damn it, where was I going with that? What were we talking about? I totally just slipped. What were we talking about? How did I get to argumentation ethics? I totally
Friedman
just
versus Rothbard.
Deontologicalism, versus it. Right. Point being, I'm getting at is even if you go to consequentialism arguments about private property or taxes or this or that, I mean, this is kind of, as he's pointing out here, this is kind of both. The idea that right here, both arguments. The idea is if you accept the fact of government or of taxes or whatever, you don't really have a moral, or you don't really have an argument. You can call it a moral argument, but it's you don't. And I guess you're saying you can make it consequentialist, but I think the idea is the idea that you're we've identified that hey, we don't want, it's preferable. Generally, it's going to be preferable overall if we create and that's the whole point of the non-aggression principle. It's this principle, generally speaking, that hey, we as humans accept we don't do this. So by that, essentially allowing or incentivizing in any way the acceptance of breaking of that, you could easily make consequential arguments that while you may say, oh, this, that, this, you're well, it's clearly, by its very nature, by just the allowing of this, you're incentivizing future ones of it. You're essentially subsidizing it.
Right.
Although, so it's even from a consequential argument, you're going to get more. So, I don't know, in a certain roundabout way, it's the same thing in a way. You know what I mean?
I would say the consequentialist argument isn't even correct in this case either, though. So,
that's kind of my point. It's even... it's almost I don't even really know.
The outcome is still not going to be better. Yeah, so
it's just when I'm evaluating the consequentialist and the deontological argument, to me they're almost like this, because there's they're kind of they're the idea oh, you must base it in one or the other. And I don't know, I feel if you have a good grasp of the understanding of either, it kind of, they're really just saying the same thing. So, but whatever. I'm not to get into an argument on deontology versus that. I think I had Kinsella, and then I also had Friedman actually on the son, or which one was
David Friedman? That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I actually had David Friedman. Yeah, I mean, so that was forever ago. Man, it was wild. I did have him on. Yeah, so I had both of them on. One of them to talk about. I think I had David Friedman on to talk about deontology.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, and then or no, vice versa. I had him on talking about consequentialism.
Yeah.
I remember I was actually preparing. I was trying to get them guys to have a debate, but I kind of get them to agree to terms. And
Kinsella's probably on the Rothbard side of it.
Yeah. So anyways, I had them both on separately to kind of evaluate the positions to see if we could figure out a proposal for a debate, and to also just kind of evaluate and talk about the positions. Anyways, I'm getting off base here, but I was just making the point that and that is the point that he is kind of making, the idea that this is just retarded. The idea that you're going to go, oh, well, classical liberalism, the idea that we're going to accept baked into the cake here something that we are already flagrantly goes against our principles is kind of like, well, I mean, that's pretty obvious. Like, how are you going to make an argument like, hey, we're all about, private property and this and that, but we have to have this entity that breaks private property, and then I'm going to make arguments against you about why you guys need to respect private property. It's like, you don't understand how this is like completely illogical, confusing. I guess you could say it's immoral too. Like, I don't know, whatever. It's just on any way you want to cut it. It's just retarded, I guess, basically. So, But yeah. Okay, let's get into the next paragraph. If liberalism is to have any future, it must repair its fundamental error. Liberals will have to recognize that no government can be contractually justified, that every government is destructive of what they want to preserve, and the protection and the production of security can only be rightfully and effectively undertaken by a system of competitive security suppliers. That is, liberalism will have to be transformed into the theory of private property anarchism, or a private law society as first outlined nearly 150 years ago by Gustave de Molinari, and in our own time, fully elaborated by Murray Rothbard. Hell yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, that's something that the next chapter is going to be about that in this book, about private property protection, essentially. So.
Oh, hell yeah, that's going to be good. The private production of defense. Yeah, he has a whole book on that, so we're getting that in a section, though. Yeah. On the private, I believe it's called On the Private Production of Defense or something like that. Is literally it might be what the book is. He doesn't put a whole lot of flair into his book, into his titles.
No,
although Democracy of God That Fails is a pretty dope name though.
Actually, yeah, this is his best title, I think.
Yeah, but he does have a lot of dry.
The rest are just like, this is literally what I talked about in this book. The private, what is it again? Private.
It literally is, I think, like the private production of like
private production of defense.
Yeah, like it literally is like the name of it, something like that.
Yeah, I have that book. Yeah,
it's pretty good.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, and Bob Murphy talks about it as well, by the way. I think in Chaos Theory and maybe otherwise as well. All right. Such a theoretical transformation would have an immediate twofold effect. On the one hand, it would lead to a purification of the contemporary liberal movement. Social democrats in liberal clothes and many high-ranking liberal government functionaries would swiftly disassociate themselves from this new liberal movement. On the other hand, the transformation would lead to the systematic radicalization of the liberal movement. For those members of the movement who still hold on to the classic notion of universal human rights and the idea that self-ownership and private property rights precede all government and legislation, the transition from liberalism to private property anarchism is only a small intellectual step, especially in light of the obvious failure of democratic government to provide the only service that it was ever intended to provide, that of protection. Private property anarchism is simply consistent liberalism.
Yep.
Liberalism thought through to its ultimate conclusion, or liberalism restored to its original intent. However,
but to be clear, I did just say or bingo or something. To be clear, obviously, when he's saying liberalism, I just want to reiterate. Obviously, if any idiots watching, he said the liberals, the libs. No, not that. You're talking about classical liberals. Sorry, go on. I cut off your last sentence.
Right, even though I'm not even sure I agree with him on that, but on the definition of it, but yeah.
Well, keep in mind, I'm pretty sure he's defining classical liberalism as what he was defining Mises's belief as.
Yeah, it's the classical definition of it. Yeah, so basically people that believe in private property rights.
Yeah, private property rights, but then because even Mises, I think, was technically a minarchist, but then in a certain roundabout way, you can make the argument he wasn't, which is kind of what I was getting at in the idea of that Mises believed in the idea of secession. I think many classical liberalism disagree. I think it's a little bit cloudy, in my opinion, the section to which he was referring to. I think he might have been referring to different ones at different times, because I think he's saying they accepted government, and I guess sort of you could say Mises accepted government, but even then it's like he said, he believes in secession down to like the lowest level and that you should be allowed to. So that's kind of in a sense de facto if you really apply it. Although I don't know, he may not have gone down to the individual level. I think that might actually have been where he drew the line, if I remember correctly. I think we got into that at the beginning of the thing. I think he did draw some sort of weird line, didn't really go into it, kind of left it hazy, almost like he didn't want to hammer it down.
That was probably the implication was that, but so now there's one sentence left in that paragraph, and it's like probably the most important sentence in that entire paragraph. So he was talking about, well, this is what we like. This is the future of liberty part of this. Like, this is what we should do. We should transform like the liberal movement into like what it was initially supposed to be under, what it was in classical liberalism, which is anarchism versus actually having a government of any kind. Like, understand how we're going to deal with like private property defense in an anarchist society. And he says it's a small intellectual step. And I'm like, okay, but I think that it's even if you call it a small step, it's like the biggest step that you could possibly take. And that is what he's saying here in this final sentence, which is, however, this small theoretical step has momentous practical implications.
Yep.
And I think that that's the problem, because I think it's really hard to get people to actually make that step, because that smashes their entire worldview. Like, yeah,
it is hard. It is
difficult.
a paradigm shift. I know we've all crossed the anarchist divide at some point, and that's kind of what he's describing here. It is a paradigm shift. It's just going, oh shit, because it is like we have a normalcy bias. It's the entire world. All right, I'll finish out this last until the end and let you catch because it's like this one blurs into, and I feel like it'd be good for you to get the commentary on this. In taking this step, liberals would renounce their allegiance to the present system, denounce democratic government as illegitimate, and reclaim their right to self-protection. Politically, with this step, they would return to the very beginnings of liberalism as a revolutionary creed. In denying the validity of all hereditary privileges, classic liberals would be placed in fundamental opposition to all established governments. Characteristically, liberalism's greatest political triumph, the American Revolution, was the outcome of a secessionist war. And the Declaration of Independence, in justifying the actions of the American colonists, Jefferson affirmed that governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, to secure the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles, and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Private property anarchists would only reaffirm the classical liberal right to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. Of course, by itself, the renewed radicalism of the liberal movement would be of little consequence, although, as the American Revolution teaches, radicalism may well be popular. Instead, it is the inspiring vision of which I do have to say that seems pretty prescient in everything that's going on today. Yeah. Instead, it is the inspiring vision of a fundamental alternative to the present system, which flows from this new radicalism that will finally break the social democratic machine. Rather than supranational political integration, world government, constitutions, courts, banks, and money, global social democracy, and universal and ubiquitous multiculturalism. Anarchist liberals propose the decomposition of the nation-state into its constituent heterogeneous parts. As their classic forebearers, new liberals do not seek to take over any government. They ignore government. They only want to be left alone by government and to succeed from its jurisdiction to organize their own protection. Unlike their predecessors who merely sought to replace a larger government with a smaller one, however, new liberals pursue the logic of secession to its end. They propose unlimited secession, the unrestricted proliferation of independent free territories, until the state's range of jurisdiction finally withers away. To this end, in a complete contrast to the statist projects of European integration and a New World Order, they promote the vision of a world of tens of thousands of free countries, regions, and cantons, of hundreds of thousands of independent free cities, such as the present-day oddities of Monaco, Andorra, San Marino, Liechtenstein, formerly Hong Kong and Singapore, and even more numerous free districts and neighborhoods economically integrated through free trade. The smaller the territory, the greater the economic pressure of opting for free trade, and an international gold commodity money standard. If and when this alternative liberal vision gains prominence in public opinion, the end of the social democratic end of history will give rise to a liberal renaissance. And it is like, well, I don't necessarily think maybe Epstein's going to be one that breaks that back, but it is, I don't know, it's weird reading that about him talking about, and thinking about when this is written, it's kind of like, oh, well, maybe radicalism would be popular. And you're like, I don't know. I mean, you do certain things, you will radicalize people. And I feel like right now we're kind of in real time watching even some of the biggest, biggest MAGA lovers really abandoning ship as well they should. Because I don't know. I feel like as a man, cheese ravioli is probably a pretty goddamn good place to draw the line. I mean, I'd say probably well before that, but I mean, if you're going to draw a line, that's a solid line, place, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think we are seeing, people become increasingly radical in that respect, but it's still going to take more than that. Obviously, we're not overthrowing the government here at any point soon. So, I mean, there's got to be another solution. I think the solution is going to have to be, like, the end result, I think, might wind up being what he's talking about here, which is something that we've seen, in modern history, which is just, it's going to sort of just disintegrate at some point, and we're going to wind up in separate, smaller entities, smaller states, and that would be much, much better. Sort of like what happened to the Soviet Union. It happened to Yugoslavia. Yeah, so that may wind up what happens because there is precedent for that. And he's not really saying that that's how it would happen here, but the result is what he's talking about here, where everything would kind of be what you would get in the result of secession. Like, it is still decentralization. And, of course, he is saying here, he is talking about classical liberalism as being what the founding fathers were practicing here, and he is talking about it in that respect. And he is saying, well, even that, the American Revolution was a secession. They seceded from Britain. So, and then you have all these like modern day liberals that are totally opposed to secession. But of course, the creation of this country was a secessionist movement. So he's saying, well, we should do that again, right? Like, states should just, however they're going to do it, they should secede from the federal government. Obviously, I agree with that. You can have multiple smaller states. And then, of course, he basically says it should be sort of like what we sort of have in Europe, and maybe what we had in monarchy Europe back in the day as well, where you have smaller entities there that are sort of self-governing entities, and they're going to be incentivized to trade with each other more, and everything would be better that way. And that's what he's saying there. And he still does say in that paragraph, again, he is saying that, like, the anarcho-capitalist society is still better than monarchy. He did mention that again, in that, because people do call him a monarchist. He's just saying monarchy is still preferable to democracy. I mean, that is the whole point here. So, yeah.
Well, with that, Toad, this has been a fun one. We'll have to do another one soon.
A lot of good stuff in the rest of that chapter there.
Yeah, we're kind of around in the end here. I mean, I don't know how many more pages it, but it can't be too much more. I mean, I don't know. But
two chapters left, I think, and I don't know how many pages.
That's probably less than 10 parts at least. So,
as far as like how many parts we do here.
Yeah, I mean, we usually break them up in like 5 to 10 page segments, depending on how long chapters are.
40 or so more pages, I think.
Okay, well, I was just saying it offhand. We didn't have to go into too deep.
Okay.
Don't really need to tell completely how the sausage is made. But Toad, let them know where they can find you at. We'll get out of here. Are we getting the gang back together? People keep bugging me about that. I mean, I don't know. Whatever.
I keep hearing about it.
Yeah.
If the gang is down, I want to do it. I'm down.
I think Liz. I think it's Liz. I think it's Liz at this point. I think Liz is like, no, you're not getting Cole back. Well, which, whatever. I'm fine with whatever you guys are. I've just heard much chatter. I just wanted to be known that I'm fine with it. If you guys want to do it,
the baby is coming soon too, so they're gonna have.
That's true. And you know what? Maybe that wouldn't be the worst thing. Well, I'll take a little bit of breaks, come back, have some sort of grand fucking Tower Gang's back.
Although last time they had a baby, we still did Tower Gang. We even did a special. We had a special. I don't know if you were on that one or not, but we basically Cole was like smoking cigars, and we just had I think it was like a viewer call-in episode. Were you there for that one?
Yeah,
celebrate.
Maybe not. I don't know.
Celebrate Cole becoming a father. we had a
I'm
bonus
not sure
episode.
if I was there. I mean, I really was, like, especially at the beginning with the format. I was like very in and out because it was when we started, it was like, hey, the idea is here that like, hey, kind of when you can. I can't commit to every time. As time went on, I was able to commit to every time, but I think early on I did miss a bunch. So
I want to bring it back. I do think that. You and I and Clint, I think, have all said that we would do it. So
so I'm down. I mean, and I'm also to be on the other side of things. With this divide, for those who pay attention to it, I'm also fine with the other setup too. If anything, I'm fine with it. So whatever, just throwing that out there. If anything, I don't know. I'm thinking about though. He is, I forgot he has a second kid coming. So he actually probably 2 young kids. I've been there.
It's gonna be a lot of work. Yeah,
it's gonna be a lot of work. So maybe it wouldn't be that bad. maybe it would take a couple of years. I don't know. We'll reevaluate things, but. I know our boys got, dude. I'm telling you, man.
Take that long, man. I don't want people to forget about Tower Gang. I want it back. I need a comedy outlet.
I guess Top did have 2 young children through a lot of this, so he was able to manage it. But I do remember when my kids were young. It is rough, so it's a lot to juggle. So I don't know. So I mean, obviously, only he could say that, and I'm sure Liz is telling him, "Fucking no." But with that, to be fair, if Liz watches this, but I know she won't. This is all in good fun. I don't.
Yeah, of course, it all is.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, dude, we make jokes about various things. I mean, Cole brings stuff up, and like he brought one thing up at Bro Grove, and then I made one comment about like the blowjob thing again, like while we were live at that thing. Like it's all in joking fashion, man.
Yeah.
It's
all right,
for
Joe.
fun.
We gotta stop. We're not even talking about Hoppe anymore. So let them know where they can find you. We can chit chat a little bit more after. But let them know where you can find you, bud.
Learn to Toad is where I am on Twitter now. That's where you can find me, and like I'll talk about the things that I'm doing basically. Where I have Better Off Dead as my sports betting podcast, which is on all the audio platforms now. Every day I do it. Every morning I'm live on YouTube doing it. Put out the audio like shortly after that. I'm doing short form videos for it on Instagram now as well, which that's actually getting more traction than. That's getting more traction than the other stuff, but the audio stuff is monetized, but it's not making me like any money right now. So,
you started. It takes a while.
I know. Somehow it needs to blow up if it's going to blow up. So that's Better Off Dead, BETTOR, at Off Dead Better at those places. And then I also have Covered in Uke, which is my ukulele YouTube channel, which I am finally posting the stuff I post on Twitter. I'm also posting it on the YouTube channel, and I do plan on doing maybe some like live request hours through that YouTube channel. And I'm setting up a Patreon where probably most of the Patreon content is going to be ukulele related. So that is to come as well.
Hell yeah, dude. For all the uke fans out there, I dig it. It's a mellows the soul, the ukulele.
I play it aggressively, but yeah.
I don't know. I like it. I like, I don't know, like I could see you taking like Slipknot, Wait and Bleed, and I'll be like, that was beautiful.
I've only done Vermilion Part 2, I think.
That's a beautiful.
Slipknot,
see, that's beautiful. Yeah,
but
it was beautiful.
It's already an acoustic song. So
yeah, that's true. It's already acoustic. All right, we're rambling.
It translated to Wait and Bleed would be difficult, I think.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're rambling. If you guys want to support what I'm doing over here, leave a like, share, subscribe, comment, leave a 5-star review on iTunes or Spotify. Follow me on Twitter at TowerGangJose. Also want to give if you do want to pay, if you want to give me money, you want to really help the show, money, that goes a long way. But obviously, I mean, I don't know, not everyone can. So, I mean, I don't want to come like I'm begging, but if you do find value out of this, the lowest level is $2, and I think I try to give back as much value as possible. You get access with that $2. You get access to early episodes. I usually do 1 to 2 episodes a week. I also usually keep about 4 or so behind the paywall. So you have weeks of paywalled content back there. You also get access to the ad-free RSS feed. You also get access to the Telegram channel, and you get access to the pre-show and priority for the call-ins on me and Austin's weekly live call-in show, Already Dead, which is on Tuesdays at 9:30 p.m. Eastern on both of our platforms. So pop in there and hang out with us. And also the sponsors, the highest level of my Patreon, I give them a big shout-out every episode as a big thank you to them because I love you and you give me money. Just like you, Toad. You give me money. I love you very much for giving me money. Yeah. Thank you for giving me money, Toad.
Yeah. Am I the only one now?
No. You're not the only one. You're the first one listed because you're my number one, baby boy. So Toad of Tower Gang, my used to be. I have like a way I roll it out. So it's hard to break my habit of saying Toad, the co-host of Tower Gang, because I always like to give a little Tower Gang plug. But old habits die hard. I still can't. Toad, my friend, at Learn to Toad, at Evergate D, at ZLVRECK, at underscore InfitZeal, Tim Tuttle, at John Klebo, Will Bells, Delicious Blueberry Rapid Eye Wine, big fan of the show, Torrin May, and Jordan Peterson. And with that, we are out of here. Love you all. See you again soon. Bye-bye.
Peace.
Peace.